The format for this meeting is an interview with an alcoholic, the hot seat, inside the alcoholic's studio. A speaker will be asked a series of questions that range from their personal story, the steps, relationship with God, and carrying the message. There are no right answers, just a fun and interesting way to share the speaker's personal insight. Our speaker for tonight is Steve or Steven. What do you prefer?
Steve's fine.
Steve. Our speaker for tonight is Steve.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Timekeeper, please allow 90 seconds per question. The meeting may run slightly longer. Members, please feel free to leave if needed. Speaker, please say done when you have finished your answers, or please say pass on questions you would prefer to skip. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Well, if I skip, do I get to go back to him?
If you want.
All right.
This is your show now.
Now it feels like a test.
It is.
Let's do it.
Okay. Let us begin. Please describe, in your own words, our basic text, the book, Alcoholics Anonymous.
In my own words, describe the book Alcoholics Anonymous. Well, it's a book written about me. The book Alcoholics Anonymous, it's a collection of the first 164 pages are how we get sober, how we stay sober, and how we carry the message. That's my words. And the remaining part of the book is personal stories, which amazingly, I occasionally find out that I have not read them all, or I was so wet-brained when I got here, I just flat out forget them over and over again. Because the back end, the last, I don't know how many pages the book is, but after 164, I've heard more recently people sharing in the beginning of meetings from the reading those areas of the book, and it's there's some good stuff there to where I should read it before we, like you were mentioning before the meeting, have our 5th edition, because there's going to be a whole new group of them, which is what the 5th edition is going to take care of. They're not going to change any of the first part of the book, but so the book for me, when I read it, when I got here, I never read books before, but when I got here, it's the first time in my life I picked up a book and didn't want to put it down. I read it everywhere, and I remember the moment I had what I believe was the beginning of my first huge spiritual experience. I was on a plane reading it, and I was having such a profound moment reading We Agnostics, where, that it's just, I didn't have a white light, but it was pretty close to it. But, the God chills, I call it, the goosebumps going on, and I wasn't looking for God, but I just found him. And that's when I didn't hide the book anymore from the people next to me. That's the first thing I noticed. I didn't care anymore. It was such a good book. So, done.
Are you an alcoholic? And if so, what personally makes you an alcoholic?
Yes. Next question. Joking. Yes, I am. I'm an alcoholic because I related to the book when I read it. I wasn't even working with a sponsor when I first got to the program and started reading the book, but I quickly identified where I was reading, that was written, quite some time ago. What I was reading applied to me. The stories, the situations, I saw myself in it, and the feelings, the way I felt, the way I drank, and the hopelessness of the disease I identified with in the book. And the book's called Alcoholics Anonymous, and if I relate to the book, I think I could use that and just self-justify I'm an alcoholic. But I also know that what I've learned about my allergy to alcohol, the way I try to say it simply to people that aren't in the program and don't have problems with alcohol, I have an allergy, and I don't have one. I've had one. Actually, I just found out this. I've said this often. I've only had one drink in my whole life, and that was the first one I split. But I ran into that buddy of mine this weekend down in Irvine, and the first time we ever had any, we had 3. Still not a ton, but that's the only time I ever had close to 1. Every other time was many more. Done.
What does the concept of anonymity mean to you?
That one feels like a test question. Anonymity to me, I know outside of the meeting, or AA, I guess events will say, but outside of the meeting, I don't mention myself personally. Nothing I say is the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's how I view it. I don't talk about Alcoholics Anonymous unless it's necessary. If someone reaches out for help or someone notices that I don't drink and they ask me about it, then I could explain to them what the solution I found, which is Alcoholics Anonymous. So anonymity, outside of the meetings, I don't discuss it unless it's needed. And another aspect of it is Within the meetings, I've discussed it in the way I've understood it is we can use last names inside of the meetings, but outside of the meetings, we don't use our last names. I don't have a strong opinion either way about it. I probably have said my last name in the meeting, but I don't think I typically do. But anonymity for me, when I first got here to the program, because I have 2 dates. I made it 10 months and graduated myself, and my divorce was final. But the first round, some of my close friends knew that I was in the program. And then I didn't have a sponsor tell me. It's what I instantly saw from the things I heard in my first 10 months. When I went back out, I didn't do any good service to AA as a whole. If anything, I harmed it a little bit because the few people that did know I was in the program saw me go back out. So my second round, I was good and beat up, just like I heard what happened in the meetings. And so when I came back, I kept my mouth shut. I got a new sponsor, and I actually worked the steps. And so outside of the meeting, I keep it to myself for the most part. But people do know I don't drink, and I keep it that simple. People ask me why I lost weight, and I said I quit drinking. That's about as far as I've ever gone. Done.
Please give us a brief sketch of your drinking career up to the time you quit.
My career started at 13-ish, and that was sharing a beer with a buddy. And from that point forward, I drank as much as I could, as often as I could, because I'd already seen up to that point in my life that when people drank, they were loud, they were having fun, they were funny. And I didn't have that euphoric experience the first time, but quickly thereafter, I found that it was an escape of reality. There's no emotion. I didn't. I fit in, and I was. It made me. I felt numbed out in general, and just in constant fear and trying to please people. I was a chameleon. Depending on who I was hanging out with, I dressed like you and acted like you. I had rap friends, and I had a group of rock friends. And when I drank with those friends, I was just one of equals, one of many, I guess. And so explaining the entire career. So it was that, and then up until high school, that just meant on the weekends camping. Camping was drinking for me, and there's no parents around. But it just progressively became more and more. It was fun. Up until the early 20s, and then the late 20s, it got to, I had success, I had apartments, I had money, and I had a whole bar full of whiskey. So you can never tell. I mean, subconsciously, I didn't say it out loud, but now I could see myself what I was doing. Like, if I have that many bottles, I won't even know how much I'm drinking, I'll try some of that. And I never understood the differences in whiskeys. I think I tried to read it, like a paragraph online about the difference between Canadian whiskey and Scotch. But for me, it got up to that point where it's just demoralizing, where I couldn't go a night without it. And done.
Alcoholism is described in the book as a fatal illness. What does that mean to you?
Alcohol is a fatal illness. I can start with that. I have no doubt that when I got here, the physical shape I was in, I'm 38 now, and I came to the program in 2015. There's math there, so I won't do it for you. But I was near death when I got here. And shortly after getting sober, I had a pulmonary embolism that's still basically unexplained, and I'm pretty convinced it was due to the stress, and I removed the drinking, which, pulmonary embolism is a blood clot, and mine stopped right next to my heart. But I was overweight, pale, the skin tone was like I've heard. I don't have any pictures of it, but I was about as unhealthy and as miserable as you could be as a person. And even when I had that embolism, I still wanted to drink, but no one would bring it to me in the hospital. I was pretty well licked, and so if I would have continued on as opposed to staying sober, I don't think there's a possibility I'd be here. Let alone, like, every time I drank and drove, that was a risk of dying. I just didn't. It wasn't part of wasn't part of God's plan for me. So, for me to drink is to die, and I have no problem with that. Done.
What are the conditions of your mind and body that accompany your alcoholism?
The conditions of my mind and body that accompany my alcoholism. The easy one, like today, alcoholism is, my mind will tell me I don't need to go to a meeting. My mind will tell me, oh gosh, I had a good one recently. Like, simple as, like, I have a McDonald's cup in my car. I can refill it. I paid for it yesterday, and I mean, I never go inside, so I'm not using their heat, and I'm saving them money, and little simple things. Where before in life, I quote unquote got away with a lot of things, but I was just living a complete. I was just a liar, cheat, and steal, and so the mental state for me, like the best description of it is when I decided to go back out and drink. I went with one of my buddies who's not one of us, and I remember looking at the board at this new bar. I justified we're going to go to this bar and have a nice meal, and they also have a bar there. It's a brewery. But I now recall looking at the chalk writing on the board, and I ordered that beer off of alcohol content. And I sat with that beer and looked around the patio of all those stupid, happy people drinking happily. Like, they were talking about stuff and doing stuff, and I'm just trying to not drink this thing, just pound it. And I'm trying to prove to my buddy across the table from me that I'm not an alcoholic. I'm watching everybody else's drinks and wondering what the hell they're doing. And then I got him home, dropped him off, and I went home and finished drinking like you're supposed to. I just got it done. And from that point, for the next 15 to 18 months, it was just miserable, demoralizing drinking. Done.
In your understanding, what is the role of a sponsor? Do you have a sponsor? And how often are you in contact?
What is the role of a sponsor?
Do you have a sponsor?
I have a sponsor. Okay. So to me, I have a sponsor. He knows he's my sponsor. I call my sponsor not daily. It varies in degrees. If I'm in trouble, of course, I'm calling him. I try to text, and he's one of those guys that'll call you back. He doesn't text so much. I know my sponsor calls his sponsor, and we have a lineage, and I might even speak sometimes with his sponsor more. So I speak to my grand sponsor, and today, by coincidence, my great-grand sponsor called me by accident because he knows another Steve, and a little God wink, because I was thinking about him that morning. So a sponsor, my sponsor, I just knew I went through the steps myself the first time, and it didn't work. I went out and had that beer. And so to me, a sponsor is someone who's worked the 12 steps and can just get me through it, because I was miserable. I needed someone who knew what they were doing, because I tried to do it myself, and I'm a pretty smart guy, don't you know? And that didn't work. So I met a sponsor who I, identified with. He has what I want, and I do what he does, what he suggests, and we got through the steps and continue to do so. And we're meeting again next week to do more work. It's continual. But so that was 2. Did I miss any of the questions? I have a sponsor. That's what sponsorship is.
The role of a sponsor in contacting a sponsor.
Yeah, so I contact him as much as I can. My sponsor told me to call him anytime I'm feeling less than, he had a funny way of saying it, less than great, basically, which is a lot. So I should call him more. That's it, done.
How have your sponsorship needs changed from early sobriety until now?
Early sobriety, I remember my head racing, spinning, like my thoughts would spin out of control where I just couldn't shut it off, and I can't remember exactly what even the issue was, but there was a point where I couldn't turn it off, and I'm in work at my cubicle downtown, and I just couldn't get the voices, it wasn't even voices, it was the repetitive thoughts like chipmunks in my brain running around, and I went outside and I called my sponsor, and he didn't. I think I ended up getting my grand sponsor because my sponsor didn't answer first time, and he said, just say Serenity Prayer over and over and over. And I did that, and a couple hours later I was fine. And to me, it was just redirecting my thoughts. Now it's much different. When those types of things happen, I have tools I can use. Like I could do the same thing they suggested, or I can listen to meditation. But now I call them with I call them like telling myself. So I'll keep a list. I journal a lot, and if I remember something that I want amends on or something I need to talk about, I keep notes on it. And then when I call them, I have a list of things I need to get off my chest, and we can inventory that and work a 4-step on it, and do the deal. Done.
Have you completed the 12 steps? And if so, What is your suggested time frame for completing the steps of AA?
I've completed the 12 steps. When I got here, I was desperate and dying. I needed to get through it quickly, and I asked my sponsor if he would take me through the Back to Basics program, which they have at the Auburn Fellowship here in the Rockland. Rockland has one as well. But what that program is 4 weeks you're through. You're through the steps working with a sponsor, not just in the meetings you work outside of those meetings, but so the first time I got completely through the steps was 4 weeks, meeting in between those once a week meetings with my sponsor to do some of the work. But it's directly out of the big book. There's no skewing it. It's just working the steps exactly as our first two did in the program. So that's what I still do with my new sponsees in the program. I already missed the question. So have I been through the steps, and how do I do it?
Have you completed the steps, and what is your suggested time frame?
Oh, I say immediately. I'm not going to be able to quote it right now. I didn't bring my book since the beginning of the meeting, but I know there's quite a few references in our big book that say immediately. And if you read the terms and just look at it for as it's actually written, they're in the hospital, I believe at Towns Hospital, writing Dr. Bob's. It sounds as though Bill's writing it. Someone's writing it. He's not the one writing. He's not well enough to write. So I'm not going to be able to do the history on it tonight, but it's immediately. We work the steps. And for me, I needed to get through it. I knew I don't graduate. And so you get through it, you rip the Band-Aid, and guess what? There's more work to do. You can get right back into it with the sponsee, or you can continue to work the steps. But I still today think of things and journal it, and I have more work to do. So that's it, done.
We won't deduct 10 points for not doing the history.
I can come back to it if I have time.
Let's circle back.
I want to give you a history lesson.
In your own words, please describe steps 1, 2, and 3.
Steps 1, 2, and 3 was it? I can't, he can, and I think I'll let him. Step 1, we admitted we were powerless. I can say this. When I got here, I didn't even understand those. It was step 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol. Our lives were unmanageable. Sure. Came to believe that a power greater ourselves could restore us to sanity. Why not? These people aren't lying around me. They found something and made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. And that is a struggle for me. And I heard today in another meeting, it was our topic. I still have to struggle with that. And by struggle, I have to remember to do that often. It's that throughout the day. It's not, you don't do it once. For me, often what it would look like is insert any situation. I ask myself, would God want me doing this? No. Turn it over to Him. What would He do? And that seems to help. Little reminders in our third step prayer. Done.
What does your unmanageability and self-will look like?
That's a good one. Self-will. I don't have a lack of them. I'm trying to think of a good one. Self-will for me is the easiest one is if I want it, it's likely not a good idea. If it's something I'm striving for, if the biggest example of that in life has been the drive for money. I want a lot of money, and so the jobs I've had and the ways I've gotten to those positions and the people I've stepped on. When I want something that's not pure and it ends up not being what's best for me, what ended up happening to me in my life was when I first got to the program, life was the rug got pulled out from underneath me, and ultimately I left my industry I was in. I was in construction management my entire career, and I left and applied for every different state agency I could. And I ended up at one of those agencies, and it's a completely different job. And the reason I like it was random. I had a consultant. I paid a guy to help me get a state job. And we just put all these applications out, and it was up to God. And I didn't say that at the time. It was up to this guy, Ken. I need a job, and I need something where my phone's not ringing off the hook, and I'm not going insane anymore. And that's a pretty... I'm not sure if I can bring that all the way back to... unmanageability for me. Everything's unmanageable. And I start the same way every day I pray, I meditate, and I use the Thomas Merton prayer. I can't quote it still. I can get kind of close. I have my own version of it, but I know that if I start my day like that, God knows my intent is to be in His will, not mine, and that pleases Him. And if I start there and I can keep myself there, often in traffic, I'm listening to don't say this on the radio, but I listen to affirmations and stuff it's weird, and but it keeps my head right and keeps me in that positive playing field on the way to work and in traffic. And I don't even know if I nailed it, but I'm going to be done with that.
What is your concept of a power greater than yourself, and how are you turning your will and your life over to it?
My power greater than myself, I call it God. And I wasn't even, again, when I first got here, when I was explaining 1 through 3, I wasn't looking for it. I just knew people go to church, and I knew all those people aren't lying. They don't, and I got to the program kind of similar, but like I was mentioning earlier on the plane reading the book, I had this profound sequence of events, one after the next, where I was reading We Agnostics, and I found God right there. Who am I to say there is no God? That I'm God, and that makes sense to a guy like me. And again, I was just reading the entire book. It's probably on number 2 read through it, and then it hit me right then and there. And then I got off that plane. I was in Seattle, got in a rental car, turned the car on. The radio station goes right to Katy Perry's. Gosh, I love this part. It was the song is, My Eyes Are Wide Open, or Wide Awake. And I cried like a little schoolgirl right then and there. She's like, I'm wide awake. I said the spiritual epiphany on the plane. I get out to the radio, I'm wide awake. But then I'm starting to cry. Men don't cry. So I rush to the button, push to the next, whatever rental car pre-programmed station. And it goes to this, I think it was a church or something station, but it was a guy explaining my same exact situation with family and alcoholism. He was explaining it on a commercial and thanking God for the help to get him sober. And that was the next thing. And those things happened like that, one after the next, on the Strive to Central Washington, to where that's my God. My God's funny. He's hilarious, and he slaps me with it. My sponsor calls it burning bushes. I set a lot of fires. God's pretty things where if I explain it to people that know me, they even see it man, because he'll say, my sponsor, I want your God, and he goes to he goes to church and all the fun stuff, but I get lucky, I guess, in that aspect. But to other people, it's different. It's doorknobs, it's nature. I see God in nature. I see God as love, because that's what God would have me do. And I know I didn't make nature, and that's bigger than me. And to me, God made that done.
Please briefly describe your experience with steps 4 and 5.
Oh, you want me to read it? I wrote it for you, so I was just going to read it tonight, just
Absolutely.
Straight up. With 4 and 5, I like. In step 4, I made the list, and the way I did it, my first time around, I didn't finish with that sponsor, and I don't know where that workbook is, and I'm still in contact with them. I could ask them. I don't even know what that list looked like, but I know it was confusing to me because we list the people, we list our fears, there was different lists in that, and my head was wrapped around trying to understand what the final product looks like, where I was Googling it and looking for examples, and I went way down that vortex, wasting time ultimately, which is why when I got to my next sponsor, I was begging them to get to this back to basics. I just need to get through it. I couldn't even tell you before where I was at in the steps, and I wanted to finish, and I needed some relief, and I knew enough by then to know all these people aren't lying. I'll get relief when I do that. So I just, for me, the best way to do it is just write. Don't think. Just right. And it looks silly, it looks sloppy, some of it's nonsense, but then as I continue to write, things start to make sense. And then he pulled the same move, and I've seen it now, I get to do it. The last minute when we were reviewing it, is there anything you left out? And then I just wrote it down and slid it to him, thinking it was my deepest, darkest secret, and turned it around and looked at it and goes, just kind of laughed at me you're an idiot, because it was something stupid, but I got it off my chest. And then 5, I admitted to God, to ourselves, another human being. And I admitted it to God, I admitted it to myself, and I admitted it to my sponsor. I've also been, there's other ways to go about that, but if we have time, we'll go back to it. Done.
What does the exact nature of our wrongs mean to you?
Oh, the exact nature of our wrongs. That's an interesting question. I haven't thought about that. The exact nature, like if I stole, I'm using this example, my son's in the room and I didn't steal from a store, but like if I stole from the store, I'm thinking out loud, like there's the monetary, like I took something from the store that doesn't belong to me, I need to give that back, but like how deep did that impact go? If I've wronged somebody, like, I might not entirely understand the nature of that question. So to me, like, I know from what's worked for me is I haven't actually analyzed that piece of it, and if I just read it out of the big book and do it like I did it, whatever that means, whatever the right answer is when you grade me, I did it because I did it straight from the first 164 pages, and so I feel confident knowing that I can argue my results later on this test because I'll use the book to argue it because I'm a Perry Mason in my head. Done.
Please briefly describe in your own words steps 6 and 7.
We're entirely ready to have God remove these defects of character and humbly asked him to do just that. Remove our shortcomings. I was extremely ready to have God remove my defects of character, and I've humbly asked him, and I continue to ask him, remove my shortcomings. And I know with step 7, I've looked at that differently, especially recently, to where being able to actually identify my shortcomings. I'm doing a lot more inventorying, a lot more writing on the same stuff recently, and like ego is one of them. I wasn't aware how dishonest I am. Not like dishonest like I lie, but like how I'm not even honest with myself. And so the more I learn about those things, the more I can ask God for help in removing those shortcomings. And for me, it's just a daily thing. And at first, anything daily sounds stupid, or maybe that works for them, but that's just not going to work for me. And then I started to just do it. And you can do it wrong. That's the secret. Just do it. And then these things become habit. And then for a guy like me, it takes a couple of years even until I start to be able to see some of the results. But as long as when I read that, I tried to analyze it. And if there's no one in this room, it would sound something like this. I would say, God, please help me not be an asshole today. Something that simple. But as long as, like I was saying earlier with the Merton prayer, if I'm speaking to God and have a conscious contact with him, I'm just being honest with him. God, I need help with today. It's going to be a hard day for me. I want to do your will, not mine. Help me. That's it. If I don't say that, things go bad. And done.
What are some of your character defects, and are they being removed?
Well, I only have 90 seconds. All right. I'm going to wait 80 seconds, then I'll start. What's the sin where you're lazy or you procrastinate? I know just procrastination we can say. Like, I distract myself from getting actual work done with shiny objects. Like, spent a lot of time in Goodwills. And what I've seen lately, back then I would see it as, I buy big books. I buy program literature when I'm there, but there's other things in life I need to do, like pay bills, organize, like move out of my mom's house, like little minor things. But instead, I'll feel like I'm on some great spiritual mission in my head to go find big books, to donate them. And it's just not the case. I'm avoiding stuff. And when I first got to the program, I go to a lot. It probably averages to a meeting a day because I hit 2 on Friday usually. But I went to meetings, but after a while, I went to a ton of meetings, but I wasn't working the steps and I didn't have a sponsor. I'm just wasting time. I'm just occupying headspace. I was getting some relief and I was drinking. I was not drinking, but I was also hiding out because I was getting there right on time and getting right out after the meeting. There's no before and after, none of the suggestions I heard. So that's one defect of character. I might have a few more. Done.
Please briefly describe steps 8 and 9.
In step 8, I made a list of all people I had harmed, and in step 8, I became willing to make amends to them all. And that also looked like I just started writing a list of all the stuff I did. Was I stingy with the drugs, and I hid some from my co-drug friend, or when I say drug, I mean booze and that. But where was I dishonest? I had to like write it out. Because when I first attempted that list, I was just trying to think of names. And basically what it looked like is I wrote down everybody. I wrote down family, friends. I started writing all the names of people I was associated with. And then I started looking for where I'd harmed them. And I could find something with everyone, like down to like your mother. You think you're the biggest saint with your mother. And did you ever lie to her? I mean, you'll find something. But for me, I made a list of everybody, and then I started finding out where I did the wrong. And I still have to do that because, again, I can't. I went out trying to get it perfect, and that was just my alcohol thinking tricked me into thinking if I don't do a thorough enough job, I'm not doing it right. And that didn't work for me. You got to immediately get through it, and you got to immediately get through the steps. And you also, if I would have had a sponsor and been listening to that sponsor, they would have helped me through that process and not let me get tripped up on how long or thorough it is. And make direct amends. Let's see, like a lot of them were, I had to admit where I was wrong and let them know that I could ask them what I could do to make it right. A lot of things you can't do. You can't repay being a bad husband. You just have to, like, there's like a living amends types of things, and there was a lot more of those than anything, to where just a lot of people didn't even know I was an alcoholic or didn't understand how sick I was, because I would hide everything. But it's difficult because if I owe money, I pay it. But I'm right now, it's not coming to my head. Like, I know I have one outstanding debt I have to make payments on, and so those arrangements had to be made. But it was just living honestly from that day forward, and a lot of living amends. And that, gosh, it's all the pressure with the microphone, maybe. But I'm having a really hard. I'm blanking out, like, of some actual little small practical ones. I think like maybe a newcomer would want to hear. And then. Yeah, I made direct amends wherever possible. There's a liquor store I owe money to. And I could that's like the one dirty one where I just haven't done it. And I need to go in and see that. Honestly, it's because the guy annoyed me. And I'm not even sure I owe money. I think I might. And for the first couple of years, I didn't do it because screw him. He shouldn't have sold me alcohol underage. And he gave me a tab. And that was fun. But now I should talk to my sponsor about that, because what do? Go in there and say, how much money do I owe you? Come on, he's not working a program. What's he going to tell me? And, I'll be done for now.
Circle back.
I'll circle back.
Why is it important for you to straighten out your past?
Oh, it's, I often hear it described as like the weight being lifted off the shoulders. And that's one of those things, when I got to the program, like, what are they talking about? Like, that sounds cute, but I don't see it, not seeing it. And when I cleared the wreckage of my past, when I wrote everything down first, and then when I shared it with another human being, it's weird. It's just all those things that I say are stupid, or that sounds kind of not for me, maybe you guys, not me. When I did it, I felt a literal weight lifted. Like, when I go to bed and when I wake up, I have zero like panic of like what I did the day before or who I need to avoid. I heard earlier in the program at a group 3 in Sacramento, the guy said he was trying to help newcomers with how you inventory. And he said, is there anyone, if you saw him in the grocery store, you would see him before they saw you and you would go down another aisle? You need to work that. You got some work to do there with that person. And I don't have that. I don't avoid people. I know there's people I don't want to be around, but that's just because I like to be around positive stuff. But it's the weight's lifted. And I already forgot your question, but I'm pretty sure I answered the best anyone's ever answered it.
Absolutely.
See?
Absolutely.
All right, done.
When you were actively drinking, did you drink whiskey in your milk?
Probably. And when I first heard that, there's like half the room goes, ugh. And I get it. I ate Tums like candy, to where my doctor said for sure you will have, was it kidney stones? And that ran in my family already. So I'll probably still be lucky enough to get to experience that. But when I heard that, I considered it, and it kind of sucks. I'm like, when I first read that, I probably wanted to try that because if I'm thinking of the coating of the stomach. 'Cause for sure I would take shots and pound milk after. That has happened. Because what do you do? Towards the end, I was, I don't know the medical terms, but whatever lining was there was probably just corroded away from Gilbey's vodka. It's the high. You probably never heard of it because it's so expensive and it's really hard to find. But it comes in a plastic jug. It's that stuff did no favor to my gastrointestinal tract, maybe. So I'm glad you brought that up, and I won't get to experience that, God willing. But I get it. I understand. It's one of those many areas I related to. Done.
Please briefly describe your experience with steps 10 and 11.
10 and 11. If I open my book here, I could find some. I still jot down little things I remember. Like if I forgot about something crappy I did, because I journal, and it says in our book we meditate and then we write immediately. I try some of that, but I also write throughout the day, and it's to write down things I hear that I can steal and say I came up with later. Like if you hear something good at the meeting and I have it written down. But for me, continue to take personal inventory. It's when I remember like one of the first moments where I really shifted on it was like everything needs to be discussed with my sponsor. I need to inventory and I need to discuss everything. And the first time I flipped a guy off after a year of sobriety, but I flipped him off under the car panel because before I flipped a guy off and he stopped his car, and I'm a big wussy and I can't fight. I know that I can't throw him, and that guy got out of his car so quick. So I learned my lesson. I flipped him off where he couldn't see me, but I recognized that is something I had not done in a long time. I'd lost my serenity, and that's not a positive behavior. So I had to tell myself about that. That's like the type of continued inventory when I have behaviors or actions that aren't in tune with what my higher power would have me do, I guess. Like, I need to discuss that, write it down, and discuss it with another. And that's my sponsor usually. Done.
What does meditation mean to you, and how do you practice it?
Meditation, to me, is the quieting of the mind. And that is another one of the many things when I thought meditation was you sit cross-legged and you have your hands circled up, you're sitting like a yogi. Maybe you have to shave your head and wear something. I went to Spirit Rock in Marin County. It's this big spiritual center, and I went and sat in a garden, and my head races with just fascinating ideas, like how cool it would be to get a selfie of me meditating. So I had a selfie stick in a meditation garden, sitting with my hands folded, because I think that's funny, and I still think it's funny. But at that point, I still had not experienced meditation. When I got meditation, I was having one of those profound thoughts on what is meditation. I Googled it, and I clicked the result, and it was a guided meditation online, and I listened to it, and all I remember is I listened to it as in a hotel room traveling for work, not drinking, imagine that, in a hotel. I woke up at about 3 a.m., still sitting up, slobbering. And but that was my first experience where I remember when I was kind of calming down, and I remember I was conscious, but I was still, and the room was quiet, and it was amazing. It was like, that was like better than any drug or high I've ever experienced in my life. And I had it recently at a fellowship down in Roseville. They have a Friday meditation, and it was similar to what you do here. They had like timed throughout the meetings, these separate ones. But I actually had like a vision. Like I saw some cool stuff, and with complete silence of the mind, like, which is counterintuitive to me. My mind is going almost from the second I wake up. The second I wake up is the moment I'm trying to stay quiet, because like I know the thoughts are going to come rushing in, so I try and get my contact with God there. Done.
Please briefly describe step 12.
Carry the message. It's my primary purpose. It's carrying the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. You have a spiritual awakening. I had one. I try to carry this message to alcoholics and people still suffering, and 90 seconds will never be enough. This is my favorite step only because it's the one a lot of people don't get to experience. People that get through the steps and don't pick up sponsees and quick, sponsor tip, like taking it back to basics. They do the work for you. You just sit there and read the book and share the experience with them. Anyone can do it. Everyone's qualified. If you've been through the steps, take someone through it. but it's my primary purpose. On my worst day, when I'm feeling the lowest of the low, I can still make a phone call, or I can still receive a phone call, and that can still change a life. I can still help someone. My primary purpose, when all of life is in the way, I can scrape all the crap out and go, I am here to carry this message. And that, at a minimum, builds me back up to where I need to be. Just carry the message. That's why I'm here. And then other stuff too, but primary purpose. Done.
Can you share with us a spiritual experience you have had as the result of these steps?
Ooh, we already let out Katy Perry a little bit. I someday want to capture that better. But Katy Perry, Wide Awake, and a man who hasn't cried in a decade, crying in a rental car, is probably like a Kia or something. I don't remember. No, it was cooler. It was like a GMC. But that was... it's hard to... If no one in this room knew me before, but I wasn't crying much. And then, I'm in my construction. I was a construction manager. I'm trying to portray the tough guy and there and throughout life. And then I get in the car and hear Katy Perry and start crying. And that was but what was happening at that moment was I was feeling God. Like Bill describes his white light experience, and I more or less had that. Like on a plane where I'm just reading a book, which is a miracle in and of itself on my own, and then understanding how God is present and God made everything around. I say God, but my higher power, however you want to say it. But I instantly knew as I was driving through the Cascade Mountains that I didn't make those mountains, and those things look freaking awesome. And that, so I had the Katy Perry thing, and then, I changed the station, and it's a guy saying, I'm Bob, and I'm an alcoholic, I lost my family, my kids. But he went on to describe the exact thing I was going through at that moment, and after I just pushed a random button, and I switched it. I can't remember what came on next, but I probably cried to that too. But those things continued to happen throughout that day, and I had that pink cloud, I understood at that point, where life was different. From that point forward, somehow I scraped together positivity. I was walking around on cloud nine for a long time. Done.
What is the message of AA, and why is it important to carry this message?
I feel like the AA president's going to listen to this, and I'm going to get a letter to my response if I don't do it right. But the message of AA is, I like it when I hear you don't have to drink anymore. You don't have to live like that anymore. And some of the most important words are keep coming back. Because if you don't know what the purpose is, or if you're having a hard time, if you can't manage or control your drinking, and if you haven't tried that, go out and have a couple beers and then don't have a beer the next day. There's all types of different ways. But if you have a problem drinking, there's a solution, and it's in mostly the first 164 pages. And it's even if you think it's the dumbest thing on the planet and you don't agree with any of it, and you have no God and you don't believe in God, guess what? There's pamphlets directed just at that explain it better. But you don't have to worship God, and you don't have to stand on your chair and sing in a choir. Just keep coming back, and you'll get it. No one's getting paid for any of this. That's what I think is the most fascinating thing. After I was at a conference this week, and I think nearly 2,000 people, all different walks of life, in the room, not getting paid, and carrying this message. They're not lying. You can debate church or other organizations about money or influence. AA is the most pure thing I've ever experienced on the planet, and it's the only place I feel truly at home and accepted. And with people that I don't discuss outside issues typically, because it's just not fun. But I could not have anything to do to identify with in the person, but in the meetings they're my best friend. Because it's the honesty. You cannot drink. That's the message. Do what I do. Done.
What are some of the principles you are practicing in your affairs today?
That's what I thought all of them are going to be like. I should have a list of the principles. Yeah. Overall, I'm just going to throw out whatever comes to my head and not try and give the right answer. Honesty, integrity, compassion, things like those three things alone are things I would have said I had before when I didn't. And those are the first two that come to mind, and those are the first, that's the way I feel. I don't go anywhere and I'm not worried about motives. I'm just The primary principles are honesty. Oh, I remember when you're supposed to say honesty, openness, and willingness. I believe how, but it's not wantingness. It's willingness. I'm willing to do what people ask me to do. So far, I think every time, including 4 a.m. on Christmas, when anyone asks for anything in the program, I've said yes. And I can't think of any time I haven't, to be honest. And that's, and honest, I mean, I can't be more honest than I just was in answering that I'm flawed individual, but if my intent is to do good, and I believe it is, I'm doing it right. And when I'm wrong, I can promptly admit it. Hey, guess what? I was being an asshole. And if I just say it, admit it, it's over with, it's done. I don't have to live with any kind of fear or looming doom over my head, and I don't. So, done.
Why is it important to put the welfare of others ahead of your own?
I just know from my experience that when I put myself first, the results are nil. It doesn't go well. I know there's other programs, things that address it. Like, I know I need to avoid being a doormat. And by that, like, I don't walk by every homeless person I see and hand them $1. I don't hand out money. You know, if they want help, I've sat and talked to people. Maybe I shouldn't spend so much time talking to, but I'm willing to help. I already forgot that question, just to be honest.
Why is it important to put the welfare of others ahead of your own?
This is why I'm here, to carry the message. And if I'm using some of those principles I discussed previously in carrying this message, I'm making this place a welcome, acceptable place for anyone. I want anyone who walks through that door, I want them to feel welcome. So I don't wear my Hillary Clinton hat or anything like. Now I feel like I have to over-explain that. I work at the state too, but like I don't profess anything. I'm just neutral. I'm here to carry the message. I want to be a good person. I want to be as God would have me, or my higher power. And if I ask myself, I have that continuous vetting. Like, it's kind of like just turning it over in number 3. I want to live life like God, my higher power would have me, and that's pretty easy. Does he want me to be an asshole or not? When I first got here, is what I'm about to say positive or negative? Is it adding value to anything, or is it not? And most of it was not, so I was quiet a lot. And that gets better over time. Done.
How do you determine or gauge the quality of your sobriety in AA?
I determine it on just my overall feeling of joyful serenity, as it's described. Like, one way or the other, at least in this most recent period of time, whatever that is, like, I find myself not turmoil. I want to I'll quickly dramatize it or whatnot. When I have serenity, and like I've had it as recently as yesterday. Like, when things are peaceful, I'm doing it right, and when they're not, there's more work to be done. There's always more work for me to be done, and so what it usually is, because I'm in service, unity, recovery. I know I'm in all 3, but usually when that gets out of balance, I can tell you this: when I'm not calling my sponsor, things aren't good. Because if I'm not calling him, it's because I don't want to talk about something. And whatever that something is, I haven't solved it yet because I've probably kept it to myself. So if I want to find one thing right now I can think of, it'd be whenever I'm not calling my sponsor or other alcoholics, I'm in trouble. And things aren't peaceful as they should be. And I already forgot what question you asked me, but I think I answered it.
Better than anyone ever.
See, told you. Amazing.
Why do you think alcoholics relapse?
Because they don't do the steps. And they don't have a sponsor. They don't listen to them. Actually, I just said that because it felt good, and that's the first thing that came to my head. I think alcoholics drink because they want to. And I guess you could work the steps and you could still have a drink. That's fine. Because I was about to say, because they maybe fully don't concede to their innermost self, they're an alcoholic. But if you're a suicidal alcoholic, you could just want to go. I've heard of that happening. I haven't experienced it yet. I don't think so. Maybe I have. But I don't know what that is. They didn't have a conscious contact. I don't have a good answer to that. It sucks people drink because as shitty as I've always had this profound fantasy, like, all right, if I had like a terminal illness and I just knew I was going to go, I'm still not going to commit suicide. I'm going to go over to like a war-torn country and I'm going to go in there and I'm going to do some damage for America. I want to get dropped in there and go take out some bad guys. And then, then I can go that way, and I'll maybe be a hero and you guys will mourn me and have bagpipes at my funeral. I seriously forgot the question already and I'm done with that answer.
Better than anyone ever.
That's ADD right there.
Are you willing and able to sponsor other members currently?
Only if they're cool enough. Next. No. I am. I haven't said no yet, and I recently agreed to sponsor a gentleman who was drunk at the time, or drinking at the time. And that was just a very unique situation. I haven't experienced that yet. And luckily I had someone who's been through the steps and worked with a lot of guys, and he was there, and we talked for a little bit. I'm trying to remember what Steve said, another Steve, so he's brilliant too. But I say yes, because honestly, at the end of the day, if I can just drag them back to basics, it's a format. I could actually take that format. I own it. It's 164 pages of the big book, and I can just sit there and read to them. I've made an attempt. If I'm willing to carry the message, so far, I really haven't said no to anyone. I know that. And I know millions of people are listening to this right now in 79 or probably 120 different countries. There's probably in between there. No one's going to come out and say I haven't been willing, because I've been willing. There's guys that haven't stayed in the program, and the seats are shaved for them. But I know it wasn't because I can't say I know anything, but I believe my intent was right, and so I'll be done with that one, I guess.
Presently, what is the most important activity in your recovery program?
Oh man, like at this moment, it's my service position, and I'm a general service representative for my home group, the Loomis Fellowship, and Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Great meeting. But what that is we're in our yearly general conference, our general service conference, where our delegate's going to go to New York with, I believe, 91 others, and my service sponsor will check me on that. But I carry my group's conscience on all the issues that affect AA as a whole. So I mentioned before the meeting I'm going to be for the next 5 weeks at my home group, an hour before the meeting, to discuss all of the items like changing the big book. It's fun to say if you want people involved, say they're going to rewrite the big book, and then you could be lying. But to me, that's a funny lie, and it'll get them really amped up and charged to maybe actually want to hear what's going on in the program. But people have to make these decisions. Things happen in AA, and there's changes need to be made. And I had no idea what I was getting into when I got involved, and now I see it for what it is, and it's a beautiful thing. It's being of service, and it's following our traditions. Like there's so many ways to answer this, but basically, I want this program to be here for the alcoholics still suffering. And it was really driven home last weekend, when I heard the service process down in Irvine. The gentleman said at the podium, he referenced when we do the silent moment of silence for the alcoholics still suffering. Before I even came here, they were praying for me, and I want these rooms to stay open for alcoholics who still suffer, and that's why I'm in service, and that's why I feel good about it. And I forgot the question. I think I answered it. So done.
Better than anyone ever.
Damn right.
Would you please generally describe the purpose of the 12 traditions of AA?
The 12 traditions are so egomaniacs don't screw it up. Like guys like me will go in there and think it'll be funny to do X, Y, or Z, and no matter what, like it is kind of fun, like a business meetings and that, because you could have the best idea on the planet, and then put it through the vetting of a group conscience, or run it by the 12 traditions. If you Google 12 traditions checklist, there's a neat little thing that comes up in ways you can vet, I guess, whether your group's minding the traditions, I believe. But the 12 traditions are what keep our common welfare should come first. Like the first one, they all support that, but they're the reason this organization is around after as long, I don't want to say the years because I'll get the math wrong. It's been around a long time. And the reason it is here is because of those. And I don't have to ever worry about rewriting that. all I have to worry about is following that and not interpreting it. Like, because we can do that, we can like skew things to our motives, I guess. But in service in general, there's a high turnover. Like, not high turnover. I mean, I have my general service position for 2 years, and I'm out. And so even if I have the biggest ego on the planet and I could shift my will all over the place, the second someone else gets that job, that same ego I have is going to go to try and take the power back down to the group level because I don't have the power at the top anymore. I'm not even saying that happens, but if there ever is shifts in power or balance, the group counteracts itself. All we have to do is just follow those and read them a lot. Done.
Can you give us some examples of meeting etiquette?
Good. My favorite, I call this one of my first service positions in a meeting. If I hear something I don't agree with, by not going, shifting my papers and acting uncomfortable, or like for some reason my ego tells me whatever you're saying is not as important as what I would say. Basically, I try and sit still and my favorite thing to do is to treat everyone with the love and respect that I would want them to treat me. Or even if I can hate myself sometimes because, don't we love to beat ourselves up? But like, treat people like you'd want them to treat your mother. Or how would God want me to treat this person? And so that's the first one. The second one, my first resentment that I remember was when I said, I'm Steve, I'm an alcoholic. I only have, and I think it was 30 to 90 somewhere. But I said I only have. And this guy, I don't even want to say the group. I don't want to give his ego that boost. But he stopped me in mid-sentence and said, we don't say only, and I lost my shit. And I'm not a tough guy, remember? But I wanted to turn around and I wanted to punch him. But I turned around enough to see like leather and stuff he was wearing. And I'm not going to punch him, and he's old. But so I guess we don't say only. You have what you have. And there's 1,000 reasons for that. But and one of the times I profusely clapped over the weekend down at the conference, we don't discuss outside issues. We don't discuss politics specifically. I don't want to hear it. I personally don't think it's a good idea to even wear the shirt, and I don't support bumper stickers. You don't know my beliefs. I just carry the message. Done.
What role models do you have in sobriety?
Oh boy, I've been listening to a lot of I want to cheat and look at it. Well, I'll start off with I heard George speak this weekend down at Prasa. George got sober, I believe, in 1971 from the Bay Area. He's been around for a long time, and the guy has been through. He spoke about our 12 traditions and how long he's been around, and how basically the guy has seen. He's seen the ups and the downs. He's seen the program as long as he's been sober. And I'm trying to stall on it's not working, and I can't make technology work. There's a guy named something. There's some great speakers out there. I can say the two guys I look up to the most who have passed on are Joe and Charlie. I still listen to that. I listen to it almost more in the Big Book now because they explained, they interpret the Big Book, because I do a lot of book studies in that, and I read the book, in the fellowship, and sponsees. I listen to them. That's like my fun time when I'm in my car and I got them on the app and I go through their workshop, and they just have a different perspective on it. And it's, for the most part, I can't think of anything that's outside of the Big Book. They're just reading the Big Book and they're telling a dummy like me what it actually means and how to actually do it or apply it in my life. But there's a long list, but it's the guys that are doing the heavy lifting in the program, the guys you see at all the meetings, the guys that have the sponsees, or the friends I know, my buddy Brian. Like, there's guys that just live it. Like, you can see it. They're there, and they're living the program. Next, done.
What advice do you have for newcomers in AA?
Find me, get me as a sponsor. And outside of that,
That's awesome.
You won't find me. I'm hiding, like Art Bell in a bunker in the desert. It really is. I used to have better thoughts on it, but it's just keep coming back. Because even a guy like me who goes to a ton of meetings and ends up drinking again, fine. I went out and drank, and I just heard, I saw all the things that I heard in meetings because I kept coming back to meetings and going to a ton of them. for me, I saw those things happening, and I just knew I was licked. So if you keep going to meetings, and then maybe consider like sticking around a few minutes before, maybe after, and say hi to someone. I can make a long list of all the assholes who didn't say hi to me. Well, it's funny now because I'm the guy that would, as soon as the Lord's Prayer or whatever, however the group closes is done, I'm almost running for the door. I'd already mapped out what rows I'm going to walk down because I already know now. I've been to 100 meetings here. I know that guy gets up slow, and I know like how I'm going to get out and escape. And it's only until that older member, I call him a hot young dude, that guy caught me pulling that, and that I was lucky. To me, like, I mean, I could say he, among thousands of others that come to these rooms, saved my life because he didn't let me escape. Who knows if I would have went out and drank that night and crashed my truck and died? Who knows? But go to meetings and get a sponsor. Ask for help. The hardest thing I ever had to do was finally just saying, I need help. And that was more or less given to me when a guy said, hi. And I stopped walking and talked to him with words. Done.
What advice do you have for old timers in AA?
I was in a panel this weekend where we were talking to. When I say we, I got to be the recording secretary, so I didn't have to actually do anything but write what other people were thinking. And I heard there's a large overtone in a room full of GSRs from the Western region on grumpy old timers in meetings. And I'm trying to think. I have the notes in the book there, but I only have like 70 or 60 seconds now. I can't find it that quickly. Basically, if you're a grumpy old timer, I personally love grumpy old timers. Those are the meetings I went to because I saw at least they're sober and they've been here a while, and some of them have nice cars, so they might have managed to keep a job for a while. I want to do what they're doing, but make it cooler, hotter, funnier. And, if one bad apple can't spoil the bunch, because if you read the traditions, you'll see why. And you could try and tell. Did we start off with grumpy old timers? Or did I just make it that?
What advice do you have for old timers?
Oh, just keep being old and spreading your good oldness. I love it. I seriously do look up to the people that have been here a long time. Those are my favorite people. Theodore, my grand sponsor, and Bobby, my great grand sponsor. They're younger at heart than I am. They have more fun than I do, and they're some of the guys that live the program. And maybe the best thing I've heard recently is go find the guy that's not talking. Call on the guy that's not talking. Reach out to the guy that's not talking. When I'm in a meeting, I try, when I can be remembered, to look for the person that's not laughing or smiling. Go to that person. Done.
Last question.
Thank you.
Are you ready?
Yeah, and then we can do it all over again.
Yeah, we got to circle back on about half.
Perfect. Dry run. Now we'll get to the real stuff.
Yeah. Can you please describe what this experience was like?
I've already felt on multiple times how I wish I could start over again. But I probably wouldn't answer any better. It's a miracle I didn't... Maybe it's my alcoholism. I didn't prepare at all. Maybe I should have. I felt like I should write down promises or some of the things. There's a couple you hit on where I'm like, I could have studied. And I know that's not the intent or the purpose. Because even if I'm working my son has headphones on, but if I'm working a horrible program, the honesty that I love about this program is when people are honest. And no one's perfect. So if I'm honest, everything's fine. Because guess what? My worst case scenario is someone saying, you should have answered, and the second I hear that, I'm already tuned out anyhow. And it just doesn't matter. That type of stuff doesn't bother me anymore because I already know what I need to do. And that's work the 12 steps. Use the phone, the hardest thing on the planet for many alcoholics like me, and maintain my conscious contact with my higher power, which is a miracle in and of itself. And I'm more in fear of losing that than I am of taking a drink, because without my higher power, I'm done. I'm gonna drink. So I already forgot what you asked me.
Do you have any words of wisdom for the listening audience, or a message for the world recovery community?
Well, I hope New Zealand's listening, because when I went out drinking, I listened to their podcast, and great AA out there. And that's the first Google result, apparently. Keep coming back. It works. And it's not a Ponzi scheme. I haven't had to pay anyone, and I've actually seen where the money goes, and it's a transparent organization. You can get involved in service if you want to know more. And the things I've heard people do, they say it's the greatest thing I've ever done. Like you hear that sometimes. Like I've heard about H&I, and everything I hear comes true. So I do the next right thing, and I say yes to the program, and it's worked so far. And I don't drink. I'm sober right now for a good period of time.
Steve, thank you so much for your willingness and for doing this. I appreciate you. From the old preamble, I wish to remind you that whatever is said at this meeting expresses our own individual opinion as of today and as of up to this moment. We do not speak for AA as a whole, and you are free to agree or disagree as you see fit. In fact, it is suggested you pay no attention to anything which might not be reconciled with what is in the AA Big Book. If you don't have a Big Book, it's time you bought one. Read it, study it, live with it, loan it, scatter it, and then learn from it what it means to be an AA.